Good morning. This is the Obscurity is Dead talk. Hopefully everybody's ready for that. This is also a continuing education, so we'll definitely exceed the 60 minutes minimum for this particular speak. My name is Michael Stokes. I am the VP of Strategic Engagements at Ridgeline International. I'm a former senior operations officer at the Central Intelligence Agency and founder of the CIA's working group on Ubiquitous Technical Surveillance, or UTS. I'm joined by Chris Miller, a seasoned national security professional with a background in uniform and civilian service, including his time as a Green Beret, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations Low Intensity Conflict, or ASD-SOLIC, and Director of the National Counterterrorism Center, and then lastly as Acting Secretary of Defense. Next is Rob Christian, retired U.S. Army Chief Warrant Officer 5 with 30 years of distinguished service, including 17 years in the Indo-Pacific region. Last is the Command Chief Warrant Officer of the 311th Signal Command. Our third panelist is Sean Berg, also a Green Beret, with decades of experience working across interagencies, governments, and nations, most recently as a SOCPAC Deputy Commander. Welcome, panelists. The title of our panel is Obscurity is Dead, Countering Digital Surveillance Threats in the Indo-Pacific. We gathered this august body not just to admire the problem, but to also discuss solutions. And a path forward to this challenge that seems to be everyone's problem, but no one's priority. So to put this in context, across the Indo-Pacific, our forces operate in a world where adversaries have incredible access to publicly available data and a vast sensor network. This means visibility is the norm and obscurity is the exception. The idea of security through obscurity is well and dead. Commercial data, AI correlation, and fused smart city sensors have extended the digital battlefield into logistics, sustainment, and daily life. I'm joined today by a group of panelists with extensive experience in this area. Let's kick this off and explore what this means for deterrence, readiness, and operational security. And by the way, if there's time at the end, I'll open it up to questions, so please think of some of those for the end. So, one could argue that visibility is the default. With commercial data, AI correlation, and smart city sensors, the Indo-Pacific is the most surveilled region on Earth. I'll start with you, Sean, and I'm going to open this up to everybody. It's a two-parter. Would you agree? And if you do, how has UTS, or Ubiquitous Technical Surveillance, changed the character of competition?
So, yeah, there you go. That's the technical surveillance of whether my mic is on or not. So I will quote the sage, noted philosopher Morpheus, who, when Zion was about to be attacked and overrun, said, "We think there are 750,000 sentinels coming to destroy everybody." And he looked at Cypher and said, "One sentinel for every man, woman, and child." That sounds exactly like the thinking of a machine to me. There are 700 million closed-circuit TVs in the PRC. In 2017, there were 20 million. And from my experience and having worked with this team here of Ridgeline, what I have become very educated on and understand from my time at SOCPAC as well. So the Brisbane Airport in Australia and Changi International in Singapore has more data on me than the United States Department of Defense or Department of War after 30 years of being a Green Beret. Because I was forced to go there during COVID to support our exercises. So they have a swab of my cheek and my DNA. They have my iris scan. They have my facial print. They have all 5 of my fingerprints. And then they have my gait analysis, which they also use. Around 2012, somewhere in the mid-10s, this thing that has 57 different sensors on it that tells not just whether it's you, but it's your pattern of carrying it in your front pocket or your back pocket, because there's a $1 trillion industry called ad tech that makes sure when you order Uber Eats, it's you ordering Uber Eats. And that data that used to be very specifically garnered from the MSS and the GRU and national state security agencies is now available for pennies just to buy on the open market, because it is a $1 trillion advertising industry to selectively choose the algorithm that is not just for your region, but even you watching the same program on a streaming service and looking at your buying habits. So the surveillance is long past. We are long past and into that arena, Mike. The challenge then becomes as an operator, and for those making decisions about operators and those who are trying to provide technology for operators, or even to the larger force protection and even back into the civilian world of what does that threat look like, is that if you think that you are going to go old school, lots of folks of a certain age in this room, and hey, we're going to get burner phones when we go into Thailand. You sound like a clown, because it doesn't even need new quantum technique or new AI to be able to recognize that your IMEI disappeared and that a new one with no history, with no ad tech background, just popped up on the screen. And so it is fooling nobody. It is providing no tactical advantage. It is providing no strategic advantage, and it is not something that you can integrate into an operational plan for the protection of your force. I'll hand it off to Rob and Chris, but we are long past there, and it is venues like this, partnerships with corporate partners that are willing to make non-proprietary software that is able to go across, and we brought soft people into this because we're the naturally purple force. We think joint, we think interagency, and all of those solutions have got to be ubiquitous across all of those agencies, and then be able to go back and forth simultaneously with the commercial off-the-shelf solutions.
Thanks. Rob?
Yeah, so very well put, Sean. I won't be as eloquent, but just for a very simplified example, I think about this morning, I ran to Diamond Head and back, and as I was sitting there thinking about this morning, the amount of closed-circuit TVs I ran through, the amount of hotspots my Suunto watch pinged, the cell towers, et cetera. There's a whole storyboard for my run this morning. Very boring storyboard and slow storyboard, but nonetheless. And so just as Sean was saying, much more eloquently than I can, we're always under surveillance, always being watched. And again, it's the anomalies that are going to cue the zeroing in on you. So yeah, it's a tough problem set we're going to get into today.
Chris?
Thank you for the wonderful question, Mr. Senator. I respectfully invoke my right against self-incrimination in accordance with the Fourth or Fifth Amendment. Oh, sorry, I got triggered there. Black tablecloth, everybody looking at you. Thanks for getting us together. Super important topic. For those of you that are very familiar with Hawaii, I'm not. Every time I fly into Hawaii, it's still a hugely special moment for me. And when you fly in and you see Pearl Harbor there, I can't help but be reminded of, how those events changed America and changed, my life and all of our lives. And it kind of is a reminder, it's kind of very appropriate that we're here today in Honolulu, where it's happening again. We are not prepared for the next fight because of so many different pathologies that are occurring in our Department of Defense. And you think about the cost that was paid that day, but I also look up at Camp Smith, and I recall that, our first victory, which was not guaranteed at all, what we have, like 2 carriers or something. I mean, it was a close run thing. And Commander Rocafort and then Ed Lawton, kind of got into the Japanese comms and figured out what was going to happen at Midway, and that was the first victory. And, of course, this is going to be heretical. We're supposed to say the reason we won World War II was because of the, power of the American fighting person. I would argue that what actually occurred was we had unbelievable dispersed communications, and we had the ability to get inside our opposition's comms to allow us to go forward. I think you could also say, the lack of, we also won due to our industrial might and our ability to produce ships, but that maybe is a different topic. So I see it happening again right now. I see that we are not prepared. We've got an enemy that is in our comms. Please don't tell DCSA and whatnot's hopefully not here. I have no special intelligence at all. I'm just assuming based on open source that our comms are compromised, and we're facing a different threat. And we talk about, ubiquitous technical surveillance is a really good job coming up with the term. I love the white paper. I love the way that Ridgeline has framed this kind of new field in an accessible way. My concern is that our leadership has not taken it seriously, and we continue to buy $14 billion aircraft carriers that will not survive the first 24 hours. And we should be investing in assured communications and figuring out how to move through the battle space and manage that. And of course, I'm not getting paid by Ridgeline. I'm happy to consider it. I've been following Ridgeline for a few years, and fell in love with the idea based not on the booth video, but on feedback from people in the field. But I'm still just extraordinarily concerned and bothered, frankly angry. I'm angry now that we're moving so slowly on adopting these technologies that are not being built by the primes, but are being built by you all in this room. And we're just not getting the attention that is required to win this thing. And I see Pearl Harbor 2.0 coming at us like a freight train, Davidson window, we all know that, and we're not moving fast enough.
Thanks, Chris. Well, that begs the question then is, for the panel, all of you, is concealment still possible? Can you hide anymore? Can you put your phones in a Faraday bag and be successful? What do you think?
Yeah, I'll go first. Sure. So it started with what I started to implicate as well, which was it is a taken and granted that you are going to be surveilled. And so now that becomes a decision for senior leadership of how much you are going to invest in forward human physical infrastructure. Because unless the plan in our O plan or what we are shooting for is invading a sovereign ally in order to establish a foothold with some sort of military solution, or to directly go to large-scale combat operation, which nobody that wore a Green Beret or any of the uniforms ever wants. Speaking of Camp Smith, if you ever read Coral and Brass by Holland M. Smith, the leader, the commander of the Forces Marine Pacific during World War II, and you hear his retelling of the blood-soaked island hopping of places that most people largely don't even know exist, much less pick out on a map, Tarawa and then Galapagos and then in the Solomons and then down into Papua New Guinea and off there. And every single one of those chunks of rock that hardly are bigger than a couple of these convention centers put together, and it's 7,000 Marines, it's 11,000 Marines, it's 14,000 Marines, plus another 12 that are wounded. That kind of body count and toll, there are no new chunks of terrain out there. There's no new math that allows you to establish that forward footprint. And we do not have some of the same diplomatic and economic relationships with our partners in the first island chain or in Southeast Asia. A lot of it is, we get frustrated sometimes with the lack of aggression or forward thinking of, say, the Japanese Self-Defense Force, because they are proscripted by their constitution to have no offensive capability nor to be able to project power beyond their own borders. We wrote that for them. We wrote that for them in their constitution so that they did not become an imperial threat. So when you think of what capability or how you were going to mitigate that, it does come back down to investing in human and physical infrastructure so that you have a baseline of white noise. And once you have a baseline of white noise, because you are not going to turn on, there's no KBR base, there's no huge fob sitting in any of these locations that are already warm or hot. If you did not already invest both diplomatically and infrastructure, excuse me, to get you there, then you're not going to have anything to turn on. I'll come back.
Hey, no, nobody should be injured today, Sean. You
Sorry.
good?
Go ahead.
We got any
I'll come
EMTs
back.
in the house?
Rob, Chris, I mean,
Sure,
quick,
so-
is concealment possible?
Is concealment possible? So I think concealment is rarely possible, but it's a luxury. And I guess the way I would think about that is think about Hollywood, think about movie stars. Think about when a dude gets into Hollywood and starts showing up in movies, right? And you see him in fights with his wife, you see him caught at the airport, all kinds of exposure all over the place, right? And then as they start to move up the line to become like a DiCaprio or a Clooney, level guy, how much do you know about their personal life? And why? Because they can afford to conceal it. And so that's why I say concealment's a luxury item. And then you get up to the stratosphere with the Musk and the Bezos and folks like that, and you know nothing about their personal lives. So while I do think it's possible, it is extremely expensive. And when we talk about troops and soldiers, it's something the government just can't do. So we got to learn how to maneuver within it. That's about as simplified as I could put it.
I would say it is possible, and it's possible in a white noise baseline that you invest in and build. That takes time, that takes patience, that takes political risk and diplomatic understanding and investing in that, and then having that conversation with our allies of, I'm not asking you to throw down the gauntlet and say I'm with you or without you, but they have to take political risk as well to allow EDCA sites to be built in the Philippines, to have permanent rotational forces that aren't assigned there, but allow for creating a level of, we've been suffering from 20 years of a boiling frog irregular warfare campaign from the PRC. I did an interview yesterday with FedGov, and they asked me the same question, and they talked about irregular warfare, and I said, it's great that they said, hey, that's going to be what we expect in the future. And I said, you've actually identified the problem in the question, because the PRC is already in phase 3 of that war, dominate. We still think of ourselves in phase 0, shaping. And so we're so far behind with creating a capability, and because they've just been slow boiling that as well. And so now, when there are dozens to hundreds of incursions of sovereign airspace for the Japanese, or for the autonomous area of Taiwan, or Malaysia, or all these 200 nautical mile economic zones, et cetera, just hundreds to thousands of them daily that started out as single ones, and they can do things inside of that operational space. That's how you hide now. There's technology out there, like the sponsor of this, that has made it their job to figure that out. Going back to the very same thing I brought up, which is if you have a footprint already, and you have the capacity for the digital you, which everybody but the person that you're physically looking at, that's you. The digital you is you, and that's more or less your phone. And when you are able to replicate that, spoof that, either amplify it or suppress it in a way that is significant enough or technologically savvy enough that, again, I'll go back to, if you ordered from DoorDash, food would show up to that digital you, whether you're sitting in Chiang Mai or you're sitting in the Beltway, or both places. Very few folks have figured out what that looks like, and what that looks like integrated into a tactical problem set, and how you would use that not just for much more sensitive special operations, but as a larger force protection capability, because I mentioned, 2012, basically data became free. It became more economically viable to keep it all than for one person to spend 3 seconds to shoot an electronic pulse in and delete it from the server. So whoever gets quantum first and is able to use that metadata to go back and figure out and predict every single move that the U.S. is about to make, whether it's an air crew landing and going to the same hotel, whether it is the fleet gearing up and all of the Copenhagen being bought out from 7-Eleven from a Ranger battalion. These are all old school indicators when you knew stuff was happening, right? All the tough boxes got bought from Home Depot, all the Copenhagen disappeared. You knew the Rangers were going somewhere.
Pizzagate, too.
And Pizzagate, right? So you absolutely can hide. But it takes investment and slow burn, which there does not seem to be to Chris's point, a Washington, D.C. and senior leadership long-term investment, long-term appetite for recognizing that that is the existential capability to never have to go to large-scale combat operations, because our adversary is 100% okay with achieving all of their strategic objectives in the phase that they are in right now.
Well, you bring up a good point. So
Chris can go, but
let's move from the environment and how DoD leadership is adapting to this visibility. Chris, you've seen it from the Pentagon's top floor down. Let's talk policy and leadership. Where are DoD blind spots in preparing for this kind of conflict with an adversary like China? And is it already effectively leveraging UTS to gain operational and strategic advantage against us?
No. Thanks. Oh, do I have to talk more?
You got. Let's
Hey,
do it.
no. Can you tell us when you joined the CIA, or is that like classified?
I don't want to say that, but yes. I'll just say I retired from there.
Yeah, but can you tell us when you started in the business? Give us a decade.
In the early 2000s.
Okay. Remember the good old days when you were, and I can neither confirm or deny that anyone in the United States military does this, but when you, like in the late 80s, when you traveled in a different persona, all you had to do was, go and get the Avery card, business card maker thing, and you would just create your own company, and then you would go and you would buy the doggone phone thing, the phone answering machine, and you're like, this is Acme International. I'm sorry, I can't answer the phone right now. Please leave a message. And then you would call back in, and then you could go any place and do anything. Man, those were the good old days. And then all of a sudden that freaking internet happens, and they start having these silly, credit checks. And you're like, oh man, how are we going to do this? And then we spent a ton of money, and you could create new freaking identity, your credit history. So yeah, we can still do that, but not at scale, man. What do you think it costs these days to create a new persona for somebody? I bet you
it's not cheap.
Okay, I was trying to get some beef. I thought you were going to tell us. I thought you were going to slip up and go, it's $1.5 million a person, and then that would be good business intelligence for everyone in the room here. Okay, now I know what our price point is because we're trying to build a business here. Man, you still got it. You're still there.
Thanks. But all right, to go back to the question, what are the DoD?
I
spots?
was dodging you.
Yeah, I know.
I'm kind of breaking faith right now. I thought at 9 months into this thing we'd be a lot further along. I'm seeing a lot of marketing coming out of the department and not a lot of outcomes. I think what you guys are seeing is we're in the midst of this transformation. I love a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, we don't understand what's happening right now, chaos. And with that, there's opportunity for us in many ways as so many of these organizations are morphing. But ultimately, there's kind of a rebellion in the DepSecDef's office. Business guy has decided that if you have any relationship, this is not spilt milk, I just wish I was there. No, I'm good not being involved at all. But there's been an approach where if you have experience inside the Beltway, somehow you're suspect and not worthy. And what I'm seeing are a bunch of quote unquote brilliant business people that do not understand the plumbing of that incredibly, the most bureaucratic Byzantine organization probably since Byzantine, and we're losing opportunities because there's lack of focus. There's a lack of focus, and it shows up out here right now where we're having to have these conversations, and we have this schism in the department right now, in our Department of Defense, where some people are like, oh, it's all Indo-PACOM, and others are, we need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Western Hem is important. My thing is, where's the leadership? We spend $1 trillion a year on national security. We can do more than one thing. And what I've been thinking about lately, where have we gotten this idea that somehow, I think it's like a Harvard Business School thing, where you can only, I didn't go, obviously, public school educated, but nonetheless, you don't want my bio. there was somehow in the department, we've got this idea that we can only do one thing at a time. And like I said, it's Harvard Business School. Like, if you want to transform an organization, you have to do one thing. And I think that is corrupting to the American way, which is, no, we're a global superpower. We have to do multiple things. So I'm not seeing the leadership, and I'm a positive person by nature, even though my introduction was like, and we're all going to die. We're not going to, because of the will and spirit of our system of government and our economic system. We're so close to having a breakout where those of us that are in smaller businesses that are literally trying to transform this thing and have to deal with the insanity of DC. Those of you that are business owners, I have such utmost respect for you going to your board. And you know how you got your VC people who don't understand government contracting. They always pretend they do, but they don't. And then, you have to tell them it's a 5-year ride to get revenue. And they're like, what? No, just sell more. And then we have the government shutdown now, and I can't imagine some of you that have to go to your board and explain, I know we forecasted this was going to be our quarter, but the government can't pay us. And but I do believe we're close, 12 to 18 months from having a fundamental transformation in our acquisition but how many more blue ribbon panels can we have? I think we're close to having that fundamental shift in prioritization and incentivization where smaller companies that are doing the heavy lifting, where the true innovation is coming out of, are going to finally be at the table and be rewarded for it. So I just beg you all to hold on a bit longer. I think it's coming. But it's still the government. It's the toughest customer in the world.
So, Chris, this begs the question then, what policy or cultural changes are required in the department that we don't have?
I was just going to add to that. I don't know how many of y'all went to General Van Antwerp's talk yesterday. It was phenomenal. But he spoke to a lot of this. And, one of the sadder things he said was the problem right now with this kind of dragging our feet to get to this is there's no American soldiers dying right now. And, that's kind of heartbreaking to hear him say that, but that's a commander's heart speaking. And so I think, as Chris was saying right now, it's up to these companies like Ridgeline and others to sound the alarm and do that educational process for our leaders to understand the true threat that's out there. So just wanted to add that to what you were saying there.
And then I would, you have 2 retired Green Beret colonels on the panel up here. One of us in the latter years of our career spent time speaking to the Senate and the House and the SASC and making decisions that affected thousands of people and policy all over this theater. The other was the acting Secretary of Defense. That was a joke.
The irony is not lost.
But I did get to do that actually as a deputy commander. If you would have asked Second Lieutenant Berg, how many times you can sit there and talk to sitting chairmen or chairwomen of these committees, and whatever that is, multiply it by 100, because some of the leadership did really recognize that was going on. And they would always ask that same question, Mike, which is, what can we do? Where are you short on policy? And at the operational and campaigning level, the authorities that are short and that have been consistently short is this siloed both money, funding, and then it comes down to the contracts that are put out to the corporate world for these are the capabilities that need to be developed. There's no umbrella campaigning dollars or order that says, here's the authority that allows you to go into a nation, which currently is a build partner capacity called 333, has its own set of money, run by a formation called the Security Cooperation, that no deference to my brothers and sisters in other services, but it's an aviation major that's never done security cooperation or been in a foreign country his entire life, and he now has a portfolio for all of Southeast Asia. And then you're getting these inputs for all these exquisite or slightly less exquisite soft capabilities or specificities that you want to build up a partner. And then you've got a counterterrorism capability, siloed again, never the twain shall meet. And then you have another irregular warfare funding pot. If you look at a campaign, again, unless we're going to invade those nations and just take it over and imperially install a formation that we think is going to be vetted and trusted, you have to have access, you have to have broad access that you can hide in plain sight doing regular, legitimate diplomatic engagement using that military element of national power to build their capacity so that nations have both the ability to support international capability and their own sovereignty. Then from that, you clearly would need to look at, hey, what are the formations that are going to be more trusted, or this is a good candidate for having an elevated capability that either is going to work with us on the counterterrorism front or in the irregular warfare capability. That umbrella policy does not exist, and it scares the hell out of all the legislators and the Pentagon, because for 20 plus years in the GWAT, at any given time, we did this, and SOCOM was very much at fault for doing this because of our bias for action and not allowing policy to hold us back to get to yes. So when policymakers were unwilling to make a decision, we figured out a way to make that happen, and we ended up calling that policy by CONOP. Policy by concept of operation. So we would come up with a thing we wanted to do, we would come up with a very specific plan, and I would say, between the hours of 9:30 and 10:30 in Honolulu, I want to go after the Berg Christian Miller network. I want lethal authority. We're going to execute them execute these operations in these areas. And at 10:30, your risk, Mr. Senator, is now over. It was very bounded. And so we asked them yes or no for very specific amounts of time. And we go back to my original statement of an irregular warfare campaign, which properly funded is hundreds of millions of dollars to a couple of $1 billion globally. Not even one aircraft carrier, not even one F-35. And then this metric, and now why I bring this up, and why this is so challenging, and why there's such reticence to engage with it on the Hill from lawmakers and policymakers, is that if we funded a global irregular warfare campaign that had all of the identity management, that had all of the both offensive and defensive capabilities that would be integral in the technical surveillance to both protect and then understand how we're being surveilled, the metric that would come out of that is nothing. Nothing would happen. Adversaries would not violate people's sovereignty. There would be no crossing of borders. There would be no economic coercion that would happen. There would be no bilateral manipulation of currency happening. And so when you are fighting for dollars, telling the HASC or the SASC or the Appropriations Committee, yes, for the $1.3 billion, how much nothing would you like, Madam Senator? It's a terrible argument to have to make, but that's why a venue like this, where you can talk about it for more than a 30-second tweet or a TikTok video, which you shouldn't have on your phone anyway because it's owned by China, is so important to be able to have a nuanced conversation. And then for the leadership that's here from the Department of Defense and more, from the corporate leaderships that are having those conversations, it's incredibly important for you to be able to understand that challenge as well, because just going and saying, hey, I want my widget to get into the new contract, yes, you are part of the solution, but you're also contributing to part of the problem as well, because it is much more holistic, and we are asking you to do something very, very antithetical to the corporate world, which is open yourselves up to financial risk by building architecture and capability that is transferable and can be moved across interagencies and services and be potentially have the build-out capacity to share with partners. And maybe you're not the proprietary thing that gets that next add to it, because we're asking you to be part of the national security solution.
So do you think commanders or leaders in the department would rather buy that F-35 or that aircraft carrier or solve this UTS problem?
I'll let them both answer, because my one answer is no congressional districts build soldiers. They want to build the F-35.
Hey, Mike, you did tell everybody that the Ridgeline geofence bubble is over us right now, so that person that left will not get constructive credit. You guys did sign the waiver before you came, right? I just want to be clear about that. Oh, geez. Hey, out of the crowd, maybe had a great. Somebody brought this up the other day. You're talking about leadership. That's really what we're talking about. Like, where's our Chester where's our Chester Nimitz? Where's our generations? Patton. I know Secretary Hegseth. Some of his initiatives kind of seem more public relations, but I think that's really what, in many ways, he's trying to reestablish that culture where, you can experiment and maybe your career isn't over. But I just throw that out there. I love me some Admiral Paparo. I think he's top shelf. Was just really super fortunate to get to meet him when he was younger. And he just had that, I was like, thank God he didn't become the CNO, right? They got that one right, sending him out here. But the problem is, I see it as well, that, you just get your 2 years, 4 years, whatever the case may be. And what I'd really like to see is a profound change in the way we think about that. Think about Rickover, right? Old man Rickover, was in the Navy for 8,000 years. And I think, he stayed in his one program office for 30-something years. You had General Schreiber, who built the ICBMs, and those people stayed in those positions. What I'd really, really like to see is identifying some talent. And I think those of us here know where the talent is and say, hey, really appreciate that, you're supposed to move every 2 years and chase the brass ring, but we really think you have something special and we want to keep you in the same position for a long, long time. Now, obviously, this will end up being corruptive eventually, but and you have to Carter had to fire Rickover. But those are kind of the leadership piece. I think is really hard. It's so easy to badmouth the leaders. I love it. I love badmouthing the generals and the admirals. That's my thing. But I do believe there's some talent that needs to be identified and allowed to really stay and drive profound change. I really, frankly, think it's not so much in the operational sector. I think it's kind of in the acquisition field and some of these innovation commands. Over.
Thanks, Chris. Transitioning to Rob. Rob, what makes surveillance in the Indo-Pacific unique or uniquely different?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is the enemy in the Pacific is the largest and most technically advanced enemy we've ever seen and can imagine. So, and they also own the majority of the infrastructure. And so, I think we already mentioned burner phones and that kind of stuff. And I think back to my SMU time where it was, turn off your phone, leave it at home, get to where you're going, get a local SIM, et cetera, and hide in the noise. And, hiding in the noise now is much more difficult when you think about the layer of AI and analytics on top of the data sphere out there and all the stuff we've dumped out there through our travels. As I came to 311 Signal Command as a command chief, immediately it was, leave the SMU mentality, and it's also a signal big army picture, right? And so I'll confess, it was kind of a brain dump of all that discipline. And now I'm part of a command team, and we're traveling everywhere you can think of. And what's the saying? Hollywood to Bollywood and penguins to polar bears. But we have the 516th Theater Signal Brigade with soldiers, scattered across the AOR. They're out there now and doing great things. And us as a command team, we're visiting all of them. We're going to Korea. We're going to Japan and all these different spots. And in real time, besides the devices we're carrying in, we got PAO posting constantly and putting our story out there. And I think back to, Charlie Flynn, and his whole idea was, Pacific Pathways and project and show that we're out there and let them know we're there. And, I think the challenge is slowly kind of morphing into, okay, you got to project, but you also got to protect. And so that's, again, back to the education side of things and companies like Ridgeline that are doing that, where now we have guys with stars on their shoulders who are starting to kind of open their ears up and listen, like Jeff Van Antwerp and guys like and General Clark, and they're like, okay, yeah, this is something we need to pay attention to. And so your question was
just
challenge of the Pacific.
Yeah.
So it's just, again, it's the largest and most technically advanced adversary we've ever seen. And I think of times being in some locations around the world where we just had to accept the fact that they own the entire port we're sitting at or wherever we're at, and everything we're doing is being watched and listened to. And so what used to be in specific locations, as they had the Silk Road Initiative going around the globe. It's kind of everywhere now, and so
Belt and Road Initiative.
Excuse me, yes, and so there's no limits to it now. That's the challenge.
Well, then, based on your experience there, how has it been working with partner forces in this environment too? Because you want them to be able to be secure, but you also need to communicate with them, and you need to be secure. How's this working?
Yeah. So, simply put, huge challenge. I think the JPMRC that was stood up and now is fully active in bringing in the coalition and partner nations to train with us and learning our TTPs, learning theirs, learning their devices versus ours. It's again, it goes back to education, and so the challenge now is you're sharing devices, you're using each other's devices, you're using each other's TTPs and knowledge base, but then you're going to locations where you might be at one point at a saturated port where everything is more easily blended into the noise, or you might be out in the middle of the Philippines doing whatever. And you think about it, we got ATSC, we got AAMDC, we got the Med, and all these units, they're just scattered to the winds right now, and working with coalition and partner nations, and if we're not on the same page, we're just a big highlight film for the enemy. So.
Yeah. That's the bread and butter of special operations, is working with allies and partners.
Absolutely.
And to your point, Rob, I got to do everything from Talisman Sabre in Australia to Yamasakura to Cobra Gold, all those, and invariably. So, we have a system sort of with Japan, but everywhere else, you go into the JOC, you throw up your slides, and the first thing all the partners do is this. And they start taking pictures of the slides and then sending them over line or WhatsApp. That's the end-to-end encryption on a Huawei backbone, because to your point and my original one of we're 20 years behind and we were not paying attention. So the entire digital infrastructure and the economic backbone of this entire theater is owned by the PRC.
Well,
that's a little bit overstated, but we've made inroads in that, but there is that legacy data and the capability. Sure, you can go ahead and place however much trust you want with your board of directors and your financial future that they didn't put a back door into any of that. That's your call.
Chris was joking or half joking that the sky is falling and where the world is about to end. But how, as Deputy SOCPAC Commander, how should these units operate in this environment? Like, are they solving this problem? How are they being successful in this UTS environment?
Yeah, so it's a combination of, if you know you're being collected and if you know that everything is going to be tracked on you, well, in some ways that's a vulnerability, in some way that's also just information. And so if you can use those opportunities to either overwhelm a system, to feed an algorithm bad data on purpose. That's your plan. When you have companies that are taking that seriously and understand and have developed the capability to actually interact and create, to either suppress or expound on your digital footprint in a way that not even Google picks up that it's not a real digital person, a real phone, or a real sensor out there. Very few folks can do that, which is why we are so passionate about even coming on a panel like this, because this is about the men and women that are forward and doing this for us, and then the footprint and the political risk to our nation of some sort of backfire or backlash in the initial stages of making a decision of moving a much larger formation forward. You can imagine there's a point at which it becomes not fait accompli, but huge amounts of risk in the build-up phase, and then there becomes a point, and all of the red gaming, which this technology is really, really good for that as well, which is understanding your own risk, bringing them in as a counter surveillance, or understanding what you're being exposed to. All the capabilities that look at this, that is just as equally valuable for you as a defense formation. So bringing those in so that you can then make a decision. Is it worth investing in a different footprint, a different technology that allows us to suppress that, or do you use that to feed the algorithm bad data? Because we know that the Chinese, the PRC, does not trust its commanders. And again, that's just information. So if they are going to rely more and more heavily on an algorithm to make command decisions, and you saw that, and I would challenge the supposition that the theater is actually unique in its surveillance. It's a gradation. Because if you go to eastern Ukraine and you go into the Balkans and you look at what the Russians are doing in their surveillance, and it's not necessarily in a cloud environment, but now you start to get into UAS as a sensor and as technical capability. And we think we're doing well by our brigade combat teams at the National Training Center, because in the last rotation, we gave them 150 drones to go up against the OPFOR, and they had 150 drones coming back at them. We ran in another organization I belong to. We ran a conference this past August in Bangkok, and we are very deep with the Ukrainian SOF. We brought the head of their drone program to come speak in person. Does anybody have any guess as to how many daily drones the Ukrainians put up in the air to combat the Russian threat? 9,000 a day. 9,000 drones a day. That's what it takes. And so to be able to integrate, share that sensor data, and if you want to truly break through and be a solution that is complementary to what we're the kind of surveillance understanding and then defense and offense that's married with that, solve the mission partner environment right now. Because that is, right now it's pictures on a phone sent over line and WhatsApp, because there is not an enclave that allows a self-healing, self-securing capability to plug in non-proprietary capacity from your host nations that will morph and grow as the technology changes every 6 months, because the moment you field it, it's not going to be worthwhile. The Ukrainians on the front line, they have their engineers literally in the foxhole front and making their soldering modifications, and basically the drone technology in Ukraine it's about a 14-day cycle before the Russians counter it, and the engineers have to come up with a new mod for that. So the idea that you're going to go into a 5-year prime, Chris, is insane. That's going to be the solution, and that's why you are so important. And the point that we're bringing up here of that's going to be the solution for the long-term security of the national security of the U.S. That's where we have to go.
Chris, you had a thought?
Mike, at risk of being accused of taking over from you, our fearless leader, may I ask a question?
Yeah, ask a question.
This is, and I think you need to answer as well.
Oh, okay.
This is solvable, right? I mean, this whole assured communications between partners, between formations, is completely solvable, isn't it? This isn't like a technologically impossible thing, is it? I'm a history major. Sorry,
I think it's solvable, and I would add this terminology that Sean, you're talking about. You mentioned irregular warfare. I would probably use the term digital signature warfare. It's almost its own domain, where we need to think about the adversaries' capabilities to collect on us and our ability to counter those threats as its own doctrine and policy. And so let's shift based on that to let's combine our policy, doctrine, human behavior. Is digital signature warfare the right term, and is that the right strategy to proactively manage our signatures out in the field?
I'll respond as a career government bureaucrat. The last thing we need is another bullshit terminology doctrine.
Fair. Hey.
No, but it's completely wrong, because that's exactly what we need. And we've been talking about leadership. We've been talking about concepts. Ultimately, yeah, it's got to be. I can just hear the people at the Pentagon like, here we go again, another good idea fairy. But really the concept, and really, you asked a question early on, like, why are we having these problems? Is it a policy issue or a leadership? Rob's talked about, education and training. I really, really think we should all proactively advance it for no other reason than just to create more chaos in the Department of Defense, because I think that's really good for us to drive these concepts into the ferment. Let's be honest, I'll be quiet. Right now, all we're trying to do is fight World War II in the Pacific again. That's exactly our operational concept. Sean spoke eloquently and at length about irregular warfare as probably a better or a corollary to large-scale conventional operations. But I'm not seeing like that. There are pockets of brilliance, kids that get it, but we're still fundamentally organized to refight the Cold War, which really was refighting World War II in the Pacific. So I'm like, we're fighting an uphill battle on that one. But
for the audience, we're going to take some questions in a minute. So if you guys want to stand up in front of the microphone, we will take some questions. But for the rest of the panel, so how do we measure success? How do we know we've won this digital signature warfare challenge?
I mean, I'll say I don't think there's ever an end state or an end point. I think there's a fine balance. So as we're talking to the tech folks out here, it's about solutions and bringing forward these gee whiz ideas of how to get around this stuff and how to figure it out and solve it. But I think you have to measure the technical with the education side too. And I always come back to that because I think of the green seaters in the room. I think like Keith Vanio and folks up at SOCPAC where they're running these AI training things that Jeff Van Antwerp talked about. You're educating the force. One of the points he made yesterday was the first soft truth, which is humans are more important than hardware or than machines. I think the flip side of that is the uneducated human is the biggest detriment to your mission, and so I think we got to keep the technical pushing, but without the education side, which I think is sometimes the harder part to get the organizations to accept and incorporate because they got a lot going on. I think then we're going to be lost in the sauce on that.
Well, training. Everybody talks about training. A lot of people are also atrophied with so much training. So is this just another piece of training that we have to throw at them? Or is this something that we could tie into existing curriculum?
I mean, it's a whole new world. So, I will say one of the things I did hear Pete Hegseth address is getting rid of a lot of the mundane training we got soldiers going through. So I'm not saying fill their plate right back up, but put some relevant things in there that are going to save lives. So, I don't think it's one or the other.
Sean?
I'll challenge, I guess, the premise of the question again, which is
Yes, please.
Deciding or asking, how do you win this is the wrong question because the goal is very Simon Sinek, right? It's a forever game. It's a infinite game, which is the goal is to keep playing. And that's the measure of success because you're never going to win or lose a digital signature management war. You lose by quitting or being priced out. And then you're just not in the game anymore. And so you are being successful because you're still playing it. And we only need Vegas odds. We need a 1.5% advantage. And if you can play that long enough, then you can attrit and you can put in the right kinds of force protection, you can put in the same kind of understanding and continue to develop and have engineers at the front that are making 14-day modifications to whether it's your bubble that is sitting over us from a provider or the drone that is going forward. So I think that is a very difficult metric for folks to grasp because my immediate reaction was very similar to what Chris's, which I think a digital signature warfare domain is a terrible idea because it doesn't have a funding line.
And who owns it?
And who owns it, right? And at the same time, I think it's absolutely the right thing that you would have to recognize that. That's again stating the problem in the question right there. That if it doesn't have a pathway to a program of record and a funding line and the acquisition cycle that is 5 years long, right now that thing does not have a super good chance of succeeding or continuing to exist in its support and actually creating relevance for formation forward. That's a huge problem. And I would say that the secondary indication is when we modify that system, that allows us to then apply that to how do we just keep playing the game. And I don't mean that it's a child's game. I mean you're in that fight. that is your measure for success.
We've explored the landscapes. Let's finish with what commanders should do next. What's a piece of advice you would recommend for commanders preparing for Indo-Pacific operations?
Stop saying you don't have any money. That's complete bull. There's plenty of money out there. They're just not spending it correctly or in the way that it should be. I get so tired of we don't have any money. I do believe operational commanders should have a lot more money to work through their things, but that's the one. Please, I'm begging commanders to stop saying that. But number two is biggest regret I have from my military career. Well, I have lots of regrets, but one of them is the Army was just brutal on not meeting with industry. You will go to jail. I mean, that was the entire culture because some people needed to go to jail, obviously. So they overcorrected. I would argue, commanders, there's so much more innovation, there's so much more thoughtfulness that's occurring in industry right now. Take every single meeting, because I'll tell you what, when you're a small company and you believe in your capability, so few of us are doing it for the money. We're doing it for the mission, right? We're this is about America, and we really believe that. And for a commander to take the time to take 30 minutes and meet with a small business, I always was hoping someone would park a Porsche in my drive at home, hey, thanks for the meeting. That doesn't happen, unfortunately, So I'd beg commanders to reach out and give us a little time a day. We're not gonna do anything unethical, immoral. That's not the way we're wired, and that would be my hope, is that what we're trying to do to support them can be a real game changer. But we're still blocked out. I would argue we're still blocked out by the primes. Come on, I'm sure there are a bunch of primes here. You guys living the dream. Hey, we need to go talk to Hegseth. They're oh, you've got a meeting with them in 15 minutes. Here we all are I'll just take the doggone program officer, the GS4. I mean, we just need to get in and just show what we can do. And so I just wish commanders would kind of have the courage to, give them the money and have the courage to experiment. And that would be my ask.
Rob or Sean, quick closing thought on what you recommend for commanders in this age?
Yes, my first thought is train and try. So train is get these technologies and these TTPs from companies like Ridgeline and other, a lot of y'all sitting here, take the training in and then let yourself be exposed and fail forward, because that's the only way your troops are going to learn. That's the only way you're going to learn. And trying to turn a blind eye to this threat is just going to leave you in the behind. Try, what I mean by that is try the technology. So there's a lot of companies that are willing to come demo and get in your doors, and commanders, they got a lot on their plate, but you never know which technology is going to come in and actually be that light bulb moment where, wow, this actually helps our soldiers understand the environment, it helps them get to where they need to go. So I'd say train and try.
Sean? And I would add, to close, I guess, deterrence has been talked about, not in this panel, but a lot in strategy and theory. So to achieve deterrence, you have to have three things. You have to have the capability to do it. You have to have the political will to employ it, but then you have to have the access and placement to employ it. Commanders do not own the political will, but they can inform that. They don't. Non-geographic combatant commanders own some of the capability development, but doing massive exercises in San Diego or off the east coast of Virginia or at the NTC and building capability does absolutely nothing for you if you need to cross 37,000 or 3,700 nautical miles of ocean plus another 2,000 miles in order to get where you think you want it to go, and there's nothing there to show up. There's no baseline of activity that you can then turn on. So that is the investment for commanders now, is to make both the operational argument for and then design their campaign for building physical and human infrastructure forward, and then giving an option and not having what we did as a government 2.5, 3 years ago when the Solomons were about to flip because the PRC was there and they were ready to disengage and they did, and recognize the PRC and dump Taiwan. And the entirety of the national security apparatus decision-making turned to the DOD and turned us off and said, what do you have for us? And it was crickets. And never let ourselves be put in that position again.
Thank you. Question from the audience.
Test, test. Hi. Good morning. Such a dreadful topic, but I'm going to hopefully give you some cheery news. So I'm Marianne Swenson with Indo-Pacom J7, right? So training, exercise, wargaming. So the JSID process is dead. Memo's out. So we're moving towards an industry common defense framework. So supporting the last two exercises, Balakatan and Talisman Saber, I get everything that you guys are saying, right? How do we use the industry common defense framework to start bringing in these capabilities through experimentation and to our exercises and start creating training objectives? Starts with our warfighters and the commanders that are sending people to our JELC events, our joint exercise planning events.
Sorry, you done?
Sorry?
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, the joint planning event. So we have a mid-planning conference, a final planning conference. Those warriors that come to our exercises remind me, hey, Ma, when we're out there, we're already forward posturing. Everything we do is for real, right? So if we're going to bring in new capabilities, there's opportunities there to work with industry, to start understanding those threats, and then how do we help mitigate that? So the industry common defense framework is there to help out.
I want to give you guys a shout out because I badmouth the primes. My last company, we had huge success going through your industry engagement, and it was like so meaningful where we were like, send an email to this person. I was like, we'll never hear from them again, right? And nope, got a reply back. Hey, we're going to handle you. We're kind of going to shepherd you through this process. It was amazing. So thanks for what you guys are doing. I love to throw rocks at the military, by the way. It's just my habit.
You can thank Brent
but you guys, and then the exercise programs, I really think Indo-Pacom is absolutely head and shoulders above anybody else. Maybe that's maybe the bar's pretty low, just trying to get you to work harder. Kidding.
Remember
now,
what
but you also hear the real problem, and I love the way that you're integrating. But the complaint is like, wow, I didn't get to like MVP until after the final planning conference or the initial, the planning conference. Like, oh, you're done for another year. That really hurts hearts. But obviously, there is a timeline that has to be met. The final thing I was going to say, and you hear this all the time, like if you're a small company. Sean, 3,700 nautical miles? Yeah, that's a lot of freaking money for a small business to go like, we love our frizzolator. It's going to change the world. And you're like, come on out and try it at Balakatan. And you're like, wow, my marketing budget is like $45. We can buy 2 like polo shirts. And you want me to ship my stuff, it's going to be $50,000. I would love, we talked about policy, I would love if there was a way that you could compete. There probably is. Please educate us. If there was a way that the government could help a little bit to defray the expenses for smaller companies, I think there's a way to do it with like revenue. All the primes will lie about it, but that's another issue. And they'll get all the money, and we'll be sitting around, doing a GoFundMe page so we can come out and like try our stuff out. A few thoughts.
There's certainly a lot of opportunities to go onto that on-ramp. And in fact, if you want to thank him himself, Brent Parker, if you can raise your hand, he's our PEMTech industry expert representative. So we keep a database of all of our industry. If you haven't, go see him. He'll get you the template. We'll get you in the industry. We work with our J8. The goal is we're in a whole of government kind of and industry. This industry common defense framework is, and I'm going to tell this industry, you have to work together to get after these big problem sets. For us, is how do we be effective with our joint warfighting concepts, right? And so if we can bring industry together and say, we want this capability, we want that capability, here's an avenue, here's an on-ramp, here's, those are opportunities this. When we have PEMTech industry days, we have, proposals that go out. I always encourage Brent, let's send that out to everybody on the database or people who have those capabilities. And we have meetings, technical exchange meetings, because if you say you have the wizard or that little thing and it complements something else, in fact, I'm doing that upstairs in a few minutes. Come to the table, let's talk about that problem hard set, and let's walk it through. Because it's a very difficult, complex landscape. And, we have to put on that big show where we have to do a maritime strike, an IAMD, a sustainment logistics piece. All of those scenarios in our large-scale exercises all have to come together. At Talisman Sabre, we had 38,000 people send down to Australia for this, exercise. And then we were working those C2, the distributed ops, we were sharing data. We want to test things out, and there's constantly new threats. And we're also watching ourselves, seeing what kind of activities in that reveal and conceal to keep it in class. I mean, all industry has to work together. I think this new industry common defense framework is workable. We're providing pathways when the government reopens.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Any other questions? Well, I'll close with this. Visibility is normal. Obscurity is exceptional. Those who shape, blend, and deceive will achieve advantage. Please join me in thanking Chris Miller, Rob Christian, and Sean Bird.